Welcome back. You're watching the Jacksonville History Show. Our guests are Rodney Hurst and Nat Glover. And 50 years ago, we've been talking about Axe Handle Saturday, which was a dark chapter, violent chapter in the city's history. And we're here 50 years later. Nat, what do you think? There's been progress, maybe not enough. What's your assessment?
Well, I think when you talk about enough, that will rest in the eyes of the beholder. I will say that when you look at Jacksonville overall, I would say something significant happened in 1995. And I'm about to talk about my own election as sheriff.
I would have mentioned it.
Well, I think it's noteworthy.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the state of Florida, there had never been an African American elected in the state, sheriff elected in the state of Florida since 1888. That was during Reconstruction, and we in Jacksonville were able to pull that off. Now, when you look at the demographics here in this city, it had to be a concerted effort. That's significant, and I say that's significant because every time I talk to some people from Orlando and Tampa, where you would think that they are very, very progressive in those cities, and there's quite a lot of evidence to indicate that they are very progressive. But that election took place here in Jacksonville, Florida, and that's significant. What it says to me is there is a foundation, a bedrock, so to speak, here in Jacksonville that will do the right thing, I think, if it's properly led and the environment is conducive.
And Rodney, I could point out that when consolidation was adopted, which was a very progressive thing for Jacksonville to do, Earl Johnson was elected to an at-large city council seat. And here was a man who had led civil rights causes, and yet, so there are shining moments.
Yeah, but progression says that it's a continuing process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we point to Earl being elected at large. We point to Nat as being elected the first sheriff, and then we kind of stop for a while, and then we go back and say, but look, we elected Nat Glover, and look, we elected this, and look at what we did, instead of a continuing process. It's almost as if we kind of revel in what we've done. We kind of stand back and say, we elected a black sheriff, you know, and that was it. Progressiveness, to me, says that you continue. You don't kind of rest on your laurels, and I think that if there's any criticism that Jacksonville has, that you would give Jacksonville, is that it rests on its laurels too much in terms of its relationship and the interaction between black folk and white folk, which we still have not fully come to grips with in this community as we should. I am not quite as generous in dealing with progress, because I think that once you really begin to say this is progress, then we kind of fall back in where we've been over a period of time. Jacksonville really needs to take its place as one of 32 professional football cities, with everything that comes along with that.
Well, I want to go back and pick up a couple of things about Axe Handle Saturday also. Media.
Mm-hmm.
There was almost no media coverage of it, right?
In fact, I kind of turned the...
If you weren't downtown and you picked up the newspaper the next day, you wouldn't know it happened.
You would not have known. Kind of turned the screw from time to time. And I tell those persons who are doing research on Axe Handle Saturday, you can't go to your local media and do any research on that. But there's a lot of information, not a lot, but still more information outside of Jacksonville than there is on Jacksonville. The press made a very conscious effort to black out the news on that. We've had that documented. Robert Saunders, who's the late field secretary of NACP, had direct conversations, quotable conversations with representatives of the Associated Press. And we are not the beneficiaries of that. By not reporting on what was happening, there is this dearth, this invisible shield that said what happened, and we don't know. Yet other folk knew what was happening in Jacksonville, and I think that that's unfortunate.
So what happened next? There were the sit-ins and the violence on Axe Handle Saturday. And I guess one of the things that happened, if we were drawing a timeline in history, would be civil rights legislation in Congress.
Well, in Jacksonville?
And that had an impact in Jacksonville, of course.
Prior to that, when we earlier asked for a biracial committee, which Mayor Burns would not appoint, and later a biracial committee was appointed, an unofficial biracial committee, if you will, by the NAACP, by the White Ministerial Alliance, the Black Ministerial Alliance, and the Chamber. And we met at Snyder Memorial Methodist Church. And for the first time, you had white men and black men and me as a teenager sitting around the table talking about community problems. A lot of acrimony, a lot of back and forth, a lot of yelling and shouting, even in God's house. But we were able to work. Fred Schultz was very instrumental in this process. And of course, in March of 1961, we integrated the downtown lunch counters, some 3 years before the Civil Rights Bill. A young lady named Marjorie Meeks, who was the secretary, and I went to Woolworth's every day for a week so that white folk could get accustomed to seeing blacks eating at the white lunch counter. And after that, all of the downtown lunch counters were integrated. So that was positive, given what had happened 8 months earlier. And then, of course, the Civil Rights Bill came along 3 years later, and then resulting legislation.
And Nat, you went back to work at Morrison's. The next day you were supposed to report for work, and I guess you weren't part of Rodney's NAACP organization, but were you angry about what was going on in the 50s and 60s in Jacksonville? I mean, you're a teenager. What was your perception of life in segregated Jacksonville?
This is the second time I've been asked that question, and I don't remember being angry. I think when something like that happens to you, and if you don't come out angry, you might be disappointed, you might have some different feelings about it, but I don't remember entertaining a whole lot of anger. And that has to put me in the mode of thinking that maybe I didn't expect any better, you know. And I was living in a neighborhood where police officers would come in the neighborhood and they would be rude, they would be disrespectful, unresponsive to our needs unless they came in to arrest people. And we kind of expected that. My parents were working for white people who seemingly were nice people, and so I quickly learned that there were some nice white people and there was probably some not so nice white people, and that's generally what you see with people anyway. We were never taught to use the slang, derogatory words, and that kind of thing. I also, as a kid, experienced an arrest that I thought was the result of some overzealous police officers who were just not very sensitive. It arrested me for having 2 napkins in my back pocket, and that came out of Morrison cafeteria. I was working in the dish room, and they actually put me in jail, and went before the judge. And it's a funny thing. Here's another race-related issue. The morning that I was supposed to go to court, my my father said I need to go in and talk to somebody to make certain that this was going to be all right. And he went to talk to what we term the white man, and he said that tell him to plead guilty, and everything will be all right. And I did. I went up there to the judge and pleaded guilty for stealing 2 napkins that I didn't really steal. I just used them as handkerchiefs in my back pocket. And Judge John Santora, after having pleaded guilty, discharged the case. And I never knew that he had discharged the case until later on when they checked it out when I became a police officer. And you know, Judge Santora had a kind of a stormy history here in Jacksonville, but he did this poor African American kid a favor when he discharged that case.
Rodney, we know Nat grew up to be sheriff, and you served in elected office as well on the city council, and I guess had an opportunity at that point to do some things that you might not have been able to do as just a protester.
Well, I saw being elected as an extension of the civil rights movement. You don't come out of the civil rights movement without wanting to do some of the things that you could do as an elected official. It was always very interesting that I was called an angry city council member. And interestingly, during these days of segregation, you didn't come out of that angry. We were not angry. We knew what the system was. It was no more nor less. And anger is not a situation where you can function very well if you're walking around being bitter and angry. So anger was not part of the equation. Interestingly, Nat was talking about Santora. So John Santora also played a very important role during the civil rights movement because he gave Parker 90 days for inciting to riot and vagrancy, and he was not even downtown that Saturday. So it's interesting. And one last point, or one point I'd like to make. You know, folk always say, well, why do you want to talk about these things? Why do you want to dredge up all this information and wash this dirty laundry and always talk? This is part of the history of what happened during the movement. And it's not a Rodney Hurst story, or a Nat Glover story, or a Harry Reagan story. It's a story about how the community, both black and white, dealt with some of the searing issues at that time, how they dealt with segregation and racism.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there are people who think it's not a good idea to focus on this anniversary. And Nat, you have had some misgivings about this over a period of time, but it is important for young people to know what their history is all about.
And we're not celebrating.
No.
Yeah, you're commemorating what happened at that time so that the people in the community know what happened. And I say to folk, we must never linger in the past, but we must never forget. And it's a history. It's a history that just happened to have occurred in Jacksonville. It's no more this week. Yeah, this week is the 45th anniversary of the Voting Rights Bill. It was passed in 1965. Earlier this year was the 50th anniversary of the sit-ins in Greensboro, and the 50th anniversary in April at Shaw University of the founding of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. These milestones are important, no matter how they are portrayed as important in terms of the historical timeline. And we look at it, we commemorate it, and we move on. And
that's the last word, I'm afraid. Rodney Hurst, Nat Glover, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
We could keep on going for a long time. I've really enjoyed it. For more information about Jacksonville history, visit the Jacksonville Historical Society website, www.jackshistory.com, or call 665-0064. So long, everyone.